On today's episode of Let's Talk F1, we discuss all of F1's 2019 transfers and what the grid might look like, as well as a quick review on the Stroll-Williams-Force India saga, and a look at the Formula 2 mid-season review. All that and more, next. Welcome everyone to my new show on the F1 Reviews channel, Let's Talk F1. This is my show that I've been talking about now for a couple of months, and I hadn't quite got a name right, I hadn't quite got an idea, because I wanted to do something a little bit different from other YouTubers. You know, I don't want to be the same content, just slightly different opinions. I want it to be different content, try and do something unique, and that's what I've been trying to look for a couple of months now. And this brand new show that I've got coming out right now, Let's Talk F1, hopefully should sort that out for you guys. This was the originally planned Formula 1 show, but I did forget that on Sky they have a show called the F1 show, so I didn't want to copy that. So I've called it Let's Talk F1. I think it's a really fitting name because it's all part of not just me discussing Formula 1, but it's about getting you guys involved as well, talking in the comments, voting in polls that I will put up during the videos. But that's the idea, and usually this is a one-off today, but usually these videos will be coming out on a Tuesday, but I haven't posted for a couple of days, and yesterday we hit the big milestone on this channel of 2,000 subscribers. So for all of you that have subscribed to this is madness. 1,000, just thinking about the numbers, just thinking 1,000 individual people have subscribed because they enjoy my videos, but 2,000 of you, that is madness. So to all of you nutters that enjoy my stuff, thank you so much. But usually, like I say, this will be on a Tuesday, but it's a little bit of a one-off to say thank you and just to get this show launched because I'm itching to get it up and I've got a bit of time today, so let's just run with it. If there's any teething issues, then we'll just put that down to episode 1, but hopefully you guys enjoy, and let's jump into straight with the first big story of the week. Or, well, it's not really a big story, is it? It's more of a discussion point, the first big discussion point, and that is all of the F1 2019 transfers, as well as all the rumours and gossip going into next season's driver lineups. Now, we already have some confirmed, and I will go back to it, but earlier on in the year, I did do a video on my predictions, so yeah, they were a bit awful, but we'll come back to those a little bit later on. But some are already confirmed, 2 teams completely are confirmed, and there's a couple of other drivers up and down the grid that have deals sorted up the way to 2020. However, deals that have been sorted this year are the 2 Mercedes boys, Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas, are both retaining their seats for next season and most likely 2020. Also, it's the 2 Renault boys. Nico Hülkenberg stays at the team for a 3rd season in a row after some really impressive showings in the past couple of years. But the biggest deal so far by a country mile, one of the biggest steals of all time in Formula 1, Daniel Ricciardo is making his way over to Renault, a deal signed last week. He will leave Red Bull at the end of the season and join Renault alongside Nico Hülkenberg. A huge deal. If you don't know about that, I do have a video explaining that whole deal up on the channel. But today we're going to focus on all the teams that haven't signed drivers yet and what this could mean for all the teams and drivers in the world of Formula 1. So why not start with the big team that still have a seat available? However, the rumours all died down, but this is Ferrari. Now, when I say the rumours have died down, this is mainly because back at the German Grand Prix, well actually even earlier than the German Grand Prix, it was the Austrian Grand Prix, the rumours came out that Charles Leclerc had signed for Ferrari. Then reports completely vanished, and it looked then straight after that it would be Kimi Raikkonen who would retain the seat. I want to quickly mention that one of the seats at Ferrari is completely taken. I think we're all aware of this, and it's this man, Sebastian Vettel. He's been pretty stellar, I would say, since joining Ferrari. I wasn't too impressed with him at Red Bull. I was definitely one of his haters. I'll definitely be honest with that, and I did feel like he did have a bit of an easy time with a great car and a not too quick teammate. However, at Ferrari, he's proved me completely wrong, and he has proved that he does deserve his 4 world championships, and he definitely has the talent to back that up. But obviously, there is still this underlying seat at Ferrari, at the lead team in Formula 1 this season, that needs to be filled. And the 2 candidates, as mentioned, are Raikkonen and Charles Leclerc. So let's start with Kimi then. Mr. Raikkonen is Mr. Consistent this season, I would say. On the podium, what appears to be almost every weekend, at least it seems like it. He's now on 99 career podiums, and next weekend, well, not it's 2 weekends, isn't it, actually, till Spa. Oh my God, this summer break, guys, it's really taking its toll on me. But at Spa, he's the king of Spa, the most wins of any driver at Spa. 4 times a Belgian Grand Prix winner. Wouldn't surprise me if Raikkonen got his 100th ever podium at that circuit. He's been a key man for Ferrari in the fact that he doesn't cause any drama, and he's a perfect wingman to Sebastian Vettel. Very happy to get out the way, but when he needs to do a job, when he needs to defend, when he needs to pick up points for the team, he's always there. And I think back to times where he could have won races. Hungary last year is a key example of where if they had a Charles Leclerc in that car right behind Vettel struggling, but the guy behind can't quite overtake. Raikkonen's happy for no team orders. Yes, he gets a little bit disgruntled, and definitely this season we've heard some fantastic team radios from Kimi, but someone like Leclerc is more likely to kick up more of a fuss, if you kind of catch my vibe. And Raikkonen, he's getting to the end of his career. He probably could have retired a couple of seasons ago, if I'm being totally honest, but since he's come back to Ferrari in 2014, he's had 1 pole position, no wins. And for most drivers, that would be a depressing feat, if you will. But for Kimi, he seems very content with it. And I think he will get a win this season. I do think he will get one eventually. But it seems like his final sort of finesse, his final push in certain situations isn't quite there. But although you could argue that Ferrari would love to have 2 drivers fighting for that World Championship, at the moment, the points Raikkonen isn't getting are generally going to Sebastian. So for them as a team, as a unit, what's happening with Raikkonen is exactly what they want and exactly what they need at that team. On the other hand, Charles Leclerc, F1's hottest prospect, I would say, just a little bit above Max Verstappen, I would say. Definitely this season, I think out of Verstappen and Leclerc's been the better driver. More recently, I think Verstappen's had better form and is in better form than Leclerc. But I said that very strangely. But you think back to the early stages of the season. How many races in a row? Was it 5 or 6 where Verstappen had an incident every single race? Yes, he eventually got a podium in Spain and then went on to win the Austrian Grand Prix a couple of races later. But in those early stages, he was crashing every single weekend. Whereas Charles Leclerc is now at a point where if he doesn't make it into Q2, if he's not in the points, it's a bad weekend. Which is crazy, considering he's arguably in the second worst car on the entire grid. So, Charles Leclerc has been the star of the season so far, in my opinion. I really do believe that. And he does deserve a shot at Ferrari. But, here's the thing. It's the politics in Formula 1. It's not just the results, it's not just the talent, it's the politics that go alongside it. And this is why I don't think Leclerc will get the drive next season. I think Raikkonen will be the one to partner Sebastian Vettel for another season. I think it'll only be a 1-season contract again. But I think Kimi's been good enough this year. You know, I think back to the first 3 or 4 races where he was on the front row of the grid every single time. And if it wasn't behind Sebastian, it was behind Lewis. So, Kimi's done really well this year, I think, and I think this has been his best season since coming back to Ferrari. And he hasn't had quite the reliability of his teammate and has been thrown under the bus a little bit with team strategy. But I think for those reasons, those key political reasons at the Ferrari team, I think Raikkonen will stay at Ferrari alongside Sebastian Vettel just for one more season, just keeping the peace within that team. And just thinking about it now, it wouldn't surprise me if he stayed for 2020 as well, and then in 2021 get Leclerc in. But I think it'll all depend on how Leclerc does at the end of this year and for next season. But I think for next season, definitely, Raikkonen will be alongside Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari. That was pretty easy. That's the first team out of the way, and I think not too much drama. But the next seat is where things automatically, straight away, start to heat up, and that is the Red Bull seat. Now we know that this man, Max Verstappen, is signed up till 2020. He's their number one driver now. Now Daniel Ricciardo, the other key man in that team, has jumped ship. He's gone to Renault. There's still that big seat. There's that one front-running seat at a Renault team still available, and it's here at Red Bull. Now, there's two key drivers that could fill this seat, both part of the Red Bull Young Driver Programme. Fernando Alonso was another that was linked, that was rumoured, but Christian Horner has since come out and pretty much squashed all those rumours and said, no, there's no way we're having Alonso. And I think that's sensible for a team like Red Bull that like to promote their own drivers, like to give chances to drivers that otherwise wouldn't have got it. That's what they're built around. That's what Helmut Marko is all about. That's what Dietrich Mateschitz, the owner of Red Bull, wants to see. And with drivers within their own programme that are more than capable of winning races, Fernando Alonso would be a ridiculous decision for the team to go ahead with. So, like I mentioned, Max Verstappen, he's in. He is locked in that seat and will be the team leader up until 2021, I would say. And whether he moves on at that time, we will see. But as the team go to Honda engines next year, which is a huge, huge switch, it'll be really interesting to see who partners Max Verstappen at that team. And I think this is one of the most interesting seats available in F1 for next season. So, let's look at the two candidates. Now, both of them were part of the Red Bull Young Driver Programme, a programme that's seen drivers such as Sebastian Vettel, the most notable, come up through the ranks and win races. Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen were also part of that programme and have gone on to some really, really fantastic seasons in Formula 1 and some fantastic drives. Other drivers, such as Sebastian Buemi, Sebastian Bourdais, Jaime Alguersuari, don't quite go on to such great things. And Jean-Eric Vergne is another one that's had to swap formula, swap championship. He's won the Formula E World Championship this season, however, couldn't quite make it in Formula 1. However, these two drivers, this is make or break for them. If they can't get this seat, this will decide whether they're a Sebastian Vettel or a Jean-Eric Vergne. And the first of these two drivers is Pierre Gasly. Now, the GP2 champion a couple of seasons ago wasn't interested by the team to join Formula 1. The team, Red Bull and Toro Rosso, didn't really see his huge potential to bring him into Formula 1 straight away. They decided that they were not going to sign him up for the 2017 season and instead would send him out to Japan to do and compete in Japanese Super Formula. Now, at the end of the 2017 season, Danny Kvyat was on some poor form, Carlos Sainz went to Renault, and Gasly was brought in for some final races at the end of the season. He was partnered with Brendan Hartley. Brendan, he's not one of the drivers that's in contention, mainly because of his age, I would say, and also his results aren't quite there compared to Gasly. Going back to Gasly then, his results this season and pace has been very, very impressive. There is no doubt about that. There is question marks over his consistency. However, I think that's more of a Toro Rosso Honda problem than Gasly's problem. He's always constantly outperforming Hartley, and on the odd race he doesn't. It might be because of a strategy change or because of weather or a crash or an incident like that, but on the whole, in qualifying and the race, Gasly's pace is much better than his teammate. But Gasly's opponent for this seat isn't his teammate. It's this man, Carlos Sainz. Now, Carlos has been in Formula 1 since 2015, was part of that Red Bull programme at Toro Rosso until the end of last season, where he swapped to Renault and is currently on a year's loan deal with Renault. Now, with Renault having Daniel Ricciardo, it's big dramas this is. This is big dramas, so hopefully you can keep up. With Ricciardo going to Renault, Sainz is out. So at the moment, Sainz is almost with no team whatsoever, except Red Bull. Red Bull own his contract, so it makes sense that he just slots into that Red Bull team straight away. However, there are a few question marks about moving Carlos to Red Bull. So, the first thing is that, arguably this season, Gasly has been the better of the two. Gasly is almost on as many points as Carlos, despite the fact that Gasly is definitely in a much worse car than that Renault. Gasly is outperforming his teammate, whereas Carlos is struggling to keep up with Hülkenberg. However, Carlos has had a lot of reliability issues, and on races such as Le Castellet in France, he was up there in P4, P5, but reliability at the end of the race really kicked him out of contention in that particular race. Also, the big no-no that seems to be going on at the moment with Carlos Sainz is the fact that he doesn't get on with Max Verstappen. Their relationship at Toro Rosso was toxic, and that's the best way to describe it. They did not get along together, and by the end of it, team orders, there was no point even trying. They were not cohesive, they were not a unit, and they struggled at the end working together. And that's something that at Red Bull they've had in the past. Webber and Vettel, that definitely wasn't a rosy relationship, and it's something I imagine they're going to want to steer clear of. And that relationship with Verstappen could really undo Carlos Sainz's whole career. It really could. So Carlos, for me, isn't in the driving seat for this Red Bull seat. It's Gasly. It's got to be Gasly. And that's such a shame because Carlos, especially last year, was one of my favourite drivers. I thought he was really solid in qualifying. He never got into any stupid incidents. Yes, he did do a spin last year at Azerbaijan, which is a little bit daft. But he was consistent, I thought, and especially after Verstappen left, Toro Rosso outperformed all his teammates there. Yes, there wasn't that many, but still. And I thought he deserves a chance. Now, this season, I have watched Carlos with a bit of nervousness, to be honest with you, because this was his chance to prove to everyone that he deserves a seat in Formula 1. And yet he's a considerable amount of points behind his teammate Nico Hülkenberg, who I think could be described as one of the best of the rest drivers on the grid. I really do. Now, there's obviously a lot of names that you can throw into that hat, but I think he really is one of those top drivers, Nico Hülkenberg. And moving to Renault was the best decision he ever made. He's not going anywhere else now for probably the rest of his career, but Sainz had to beat him to prove to Red Bull he deserved that seat, and he's not beating him. And even with those reliability issues, he's not quite there either. So, for me, it's got to be Gasly. It really does. But this is one I'd love to know. Who do you guys think deserves this Red Bull seat? Gasly, Sainz, or will it be Alonso or someone a little bit left afield? I really want to know that from you guys in the comments below. But for Red Bull, for me, it's going to be Verstappen and Gasly. Just a quick mention, at the beginning of the year, my prediction for Red Bull for next year was Verstappen Sainz, so that's definitely changed about a little bit in more recent times. But let's move on to the next team, and the next team I'm going to cover is McLaren. Now, you've all heard the stories of Fernando Alonso. Will he stay? Will he go? My opinion, we'll just get it out of the way, is he will go. I really believe that. McLaren next year won't be winning races. They won't be for the next few years. I believe that, and I think it's time Alonso calls it a day. We've got that out of the way. Who are the drivers in contention? Well, the reason I moved straight onto McLaren after Red Bull is Carlos Sainz is very heavily linked with this move. Friends with Alonso, both Spaniards in F1. McLaren need a stable driver who can partner someone who probably isn't as stable or is a rookie. Now, we've gone through the pros and cons of Sainz. He's got good pace, but he isn't an A-star driver. He could be, he has the potential, but he needs to fit into a team where he feels wanted, grounded. The only reason I say grounded is that at Renault, he's not really their driver. He's Red Bull's driver. So I think he needs that stability to be able to perform. So I think Sainz, for me, is a given. I think he's in at McLaren. I really do. I think McLaren will sign Carlos Sainz next season. I think the biggest question mark now is who partners him. Will it be Van Dorn, who has been part of this team for 2 seasons, or will it be a rookie in Lando Norris? They're the 2 other options that are partnered with this McLaren seat. Just a quick mention as well, Sergio Perez is another one linked to a return to McLaren, but I don't think that's going to happen. So realistically, it's Sainz, Van Dorn, Norris and Alonso are the 4. Alonso's retiring for me. Sainz is in. So who's going to partner Sainz? Well, let's start off with Stoffel. The Belgian has been in Formula 1 for 2 seasons now, and last season wasn't stellar. Wasn't great. Ended off the year quite well compared to Alonso, but started off pretty poor. This year, I think we all hope that he could improve. He could catch up to Alonso, and in the early stages of the season, he was right there. For the first 4 races, he got points in every single race and looked to be right there with Alonso. But after those first 4 races, I think it was about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which was the 4th race of the year. But after that, he pretty much just fell off the pace. Absolutely nowhere. And would go out in Q1, Alonso would be fighting almost to Q3. And in the race, Van Dorn would have slow starts, maybe have a couple of incidents, and be nowhere. Now, last time out at the Hungarian Grand Prix was Van Dorn's best race of the season by a country mile. Up there in the points, just behind Alonso, and had fresher tyres and probably could have overtaken Alonso. But reliability issues took him out of the race and was another non-points finish. And for Van Dorn, that's the worst time. The worst timing, considering the summer break is usually when deals get done. But I think for me, he's hit a stroke of luck. And that is luck that wasn't crafted by himself, but by the Formula 2 gods. And that is that Lando Norris is no longer leading the Formula 2 World Championship after some really good results from George Russell. It's George Russell, the Mercedes young driver, who is currently leading that championship, meaning Norris is in second place and slightly vulnerable. Now, he's been good this season, Norris, more consistent than George Russell, but George Russell's been more consistent at winning. He generally wins, then he gets no points, whereas Norris is generally always in the points, but not quite winning every weekend. And question marks have come over Norris a little bit, whether it's too soon he's put into that F1 seat, and I think that could save Stoffel Van Dorn. Also, the fact that there is interest from Toro Rosso for Norris to drive there for a season takes the pressure off Van Dorn a little bit. However, he's not out of the water yet, because supposedly there is a clause in Norris's contract where if he is not driving for McLaren next season, he is free to go wherever he wants. And I think there's definitely teams up and down the grid that would definitely take Lando Norris next season. So McLaren are going to have to be careful when negotiating with this. I think for me, the two things this will come down to is whether McLaren want a hard reset, if they want completely fresh drivers, or if they want that familiarity with Van Dorn in case Sainz doesn't fit into the team straight away. Because can you imagine the chaos if Sainz and Norris both came in, both new drivers to the team, and neither of them fitted in? That would be atrocious for McLaren. It really would. So for me, if I'm being honest, I think they need a little bit of stability these days. They've been chopping and changing everything at the moment, and yes, you could argue that it's best to change everything straight away. Let's gear up for 2021, but I think going forward and in the future, I think the best lineup for McLaren is going to be Van Dorn and Norris. I do believe that, and Van Dorn, I think he might have his mojo back after that Hungarian Grand Prix. I hope he does. I really hope he does, but I think Van Dorn and Norris is the ideal lineup going into 2021. But because I think Sainz is going in, I think Norris will stay in F2 for another season. I really do, and I think Van Dorn will hold his seat at McLaren for another season, but that season after, he's got to beat Sainz. And if he doesn't, then he's gone. But I think for next year, it'll be Sainz and Van Dorn in at McLaren. That one will cause some controversy, I believe, so I'd love to know your thoughts on that one as well. Actually, for the McLaren one, in the top right-hand corner right now, a little poll should have popped up. That will be for you to vote who you think will be at McLaren next season. You pick your favourite, who you think will be there, just your number one. You can only vote once, unfortunately, on the YouTube poll. But then you'll be able to see on the percentages who are the two most likely that you guys think. So I'll be interested to know that. If you fancy, you don't have to. Do not worry. Let's keep going then. Let's keep going. Let's try and move up a little bit. Let's speed up a little bit because we spoke about the big seats now. We're moving on to a little bit to the lesser seats, if you will, a little bit further down the grid. But let's go with the final, I don't want to say front-running team, but they are the furthest up of all the rest of the teams, and that is Haas. Now, I think it's fair to say that Haas are the fourth best car this year. They haven't been every weekend, and they're not going to be every weekend because of how close that midfield is. But overall, they're the fourth best team. And I think, to be honest with you, I think they're happy with their driver lineup. I think they will retain their lineup for next season. And as I said, I want to move through this a little bit quicker because we've got plenty more on this show to cover. But I think they'll keep the same lineup, Will Haas. And I think this because Magnussen has been solid this year, but also Grosjean, who hasn't been as consistent this year, as we know, almost like a 2012 Grosjean, crashing almost every weekend early on in this season, didn't pick up points until, was it the German Grand Prix picked up his first point? Until the Austrian Grand Prix. So he's had a really tough start to the season. However, I think he'll stay. And the main reason I think this is there's only one other person that has been linked with the seat here, and that's Sergio Perez. I think Perez would be a good fit for Haas, but many times this year, many times, Haas have spoken about loyalty and the fact that Roman completely gave his all and took a real dive into nowhere with the Haas team. Dive into nowhere. That's not the saying, but that's what we'll go with. A leap of faith, if you will. A stab in the dark. That's what I'm looking for. Stab in the dark. That is the phrase I was looking for. He took a stab in the dark with the Haas team. A brand new team in Formula 1. No one knew where they were going to be. Were they even going to be behind Manor? You know, those were the sort of question marks that were coming around in their first season. They weren't, mainly because of Grosjean's driving, but Grosjean has been that number one driver ever since the team came along in 2016. He really has, and this is their first year that Grosjean hasn't quite been on the money. And I think it would be wrong for the team to kick him out, and I think they won't. I think they will stick with Roman for at least another year. And I say that because if he performs for the rest of the season, if he performs next year, I think they'll keep him on. But there's such harmony within that team between the two drivers, I think it'll be sensible to keep him on. And that's all I'm going to say about Haas. Perez, like I said, is an option and would come with that sponsorship money, but they don't need money, Haas. They are comfortably sat with the Ferrari group. And yeah, for me, there's just no way Perez is going to that team. It's going to be Grosjean and Magnussen at Haas next season. Talking about Perez, this week it was, in fact, Lawrence Stroll bought out the Force India team from administration, something that Sergio Perez had put into place to save more than 400 jobs at that Force India team. Now, combining stories here, this is fun. What the consequences were of that deal are not yet known. However, it's almost a given that Lance Stroll will move from Williams to the Force India team for next season. That most likely won't be called Force India, but that doesn't need to be addressed right now. But who's going to partner Lance Stroll at Force India? Will it be Ocon? Will it be Perez? I think it'll be Ocon. It'd be silly for Force India to get rid of their more consistent driver this year, and it'd also be silly to ruin their ties with Mercedes. That would just be stupid of them to do. And considering that Mercedes are the team that they owe money to, it would be stupid to cut ties with Ocon. However, Perez is coming to the end of his career. And although he's been Mr. Consistent for many years at Force India, picking up 5 of the team's 6 podiums ever, I think it's time for him to part ways. And I think it's more the fact that Ocon, it would be daft to get rid of him, than they should get rid of Perez, if you catch my vibe there. And I think the team would love to keep Perez and Ocon. I think that's the better lineup than Stroll and anyone else. But Stroll's coming. Stroll, the big monster, the big baddie, is on his way to Force India. So where does that leave Perez? Well, let's move on to the next team that sort of goes along with this deal, and that's Williams. Not only will the team lose funding from Martini next season, ending their sponsorship deal, they will also lose the influence of Lawrence Stroll, as well as his cash, as well as his wallet. He'll be gone, which means Lance Stroll will go. So their current lineup of Lance Stroll and Sergei Sorokin will end, and I think Sorokin will keep his seat. I think he's been quick enough, I think he's been respectable enough to the team that he deserves another season. So there's a seat at Williams. Who's going to go there? Well, there's this man, Robert Kubica, who many people up and down the grid and in the world of Formula 1 would love to see him return to Formula 1. And I think that could be an option. I think Williams will look for a guy with experience. Whether that's Kubica is yet to be seen, but I think the more sensible option would be to get Sergio Perez in the door. Now, Perez, this is going to be a huge step back for him, but I think it's the sensible option. Yes, he could move to Haas, but I don't think that's going to happen. So when you look at all the other spaces up and down the grid, his best seat really available to him would be the Williams drive. And with all the history surrounded with Williams, with all the technology, with all the facilities, as well as the personnel they have within that team, Williams is his best option. I think it'd be a perfect fit for Perez. Yes, they're not as quick this season, but I think that will change next year. Fingers crossed anyway. But I think for Williams, Perez is the perfect man. And with Perez's sponsors, that will help them out considerably. And I think that's the most likely destination for Perez. So for me, for Force India next year, it will be Ocon and Stroll. But for Williams, I think it will be Perez and Sorokin. Watch your eye on those two teams. But not many teams to go then. Now only a couple left. And one is this team, Alfa Romeo Sauber. So with Charles not going to Ferrari, he will stay at Sauber. That's a given. Unless he moves to Haas. But I don't think that'll happen. So that's a given. He'll be at Sauber. But who's going to be alongside him? A question that's been asked all season long and was definitely on everyone's lips at the end of last season when Alfa Romeo was announced is, will Ericsson stay or will it be Giovinazzi? So Giovinazzi last season did the first two races instead of Pascal Wehrlein, and Giovinazzi was very, very impressive. However, the team chose this season to keep Ericsson alongside rookie Leclerc, to give him a bit of experience alongside the team and to give the team someone they know with a lot of money in their pocket at the same time. For me, it's got to be Gio in that seat. And the reason I say this, Giovinazzi, is that he's the better driver out of Ericsson and himself. In those two races last season, Giovinazzi had better pace than Ericsson. I think for next year, he's going to push Leclerc much better. As in, I think he'll challenge Leclerc more, forcing Leclerc to push out better results. And also, I think next season, Alfa Romeo and Ferrari will put more money into Sauber, considering Leclerc will be at that team. And so I think for me, it'll be every positive that comes with Ericsson will be gone. The fact that he had the experience over Leclerc, he still has more experience than Leclerc, but Leclerc's outperformed him. Leclerc doesn't need the experience alongside him. Leclerc will happily take that number one driver, Giovinazzi that number two driver. The money that Ericsson brings to the team won't be needed with the extra funding from Ferrari and from Alfa Romeo. The only thing left is the ties Ericsson has to the upper management, which I think won't be enough to hold off the Ferrari and the Alfa Romeo boys. I think they're really going to look now to put their claws deep into the roots at Sauber and really try and take over that team as a Ferrari B team. And the best way to do that now is to put in Giovinazzi. So for me, Giovinazzi is going to be alongside Leclerc at Sauber. We got that one out of the way pretty quickly. So let's move on to the final team then, and then we can move on to some other things in the show, because we've spoken about this for a very long time now. The last team. This season, the team switched to Honda Power. That's their big news going into the season. And where would they be? That was another question mark. Well, most, including myself, believe they'd be at the tail end of the grid. But they proved everyone wrong by the second race of the season in Bahrain, picking up a P4 courtesy of Pierre Gasly. And since then, I wouldn't say they've improved, but they've been consistently fighting for points. And next year, their driver lineup is going to be key to the continued success and development of that team. And with Gasly off to Red Bull, who's going to be in those two seats? Well, I think they'll keep Hartley. I really do. I think he's been solid this year, especially for development. And as we saw in Germany, he's really experienced. And I said that quite dramatically, but he came out after the German Grand Prix, starting last, working his way up into the points, that his experience winning Le Mans, being a multiple series winner, helped him so much to judge changing conditions. It's helped him in practice sessions and developing the car, and I think that's something that Honda and Toro Rosso want to keep for next year. But who'll be alongside him? Won't be Sainz, won't be Gasly. Who will it be? Well, Danny Kvyat, won't be him either. He's a Ferrari boy nowadays, so they can't rely on him this year. But someone they can rely on, or a few people they could rely on, is some of the Formula 2 prospects, and there's 3 drivers that I think it could be. First, being Lando Norris. As mentioned earlier, he might not get a seat at McLaren. He might have a clause saying he can go wherever he wants, and Toro Rosso earlier on in the year were very heavily linked with Lando Norris to bring him to their team, and I think he could be an option. Another from Formula 2 would be Sean Gelael, someone who has an okay season in Formula 2, picked up a podium and a couple of good results here and there. He's currently sat in P14 in the championship, though. Apart from that podium, he's had 1 5th place and then only 2 other points finishes. So it's not been great for him, but it's been okay. Formula 2 is pretty carnage, so it's been okay, but nothing stellar. The other guy, which I think is the most likely out of the 3 Formula 2 prospects, is Narai Fukuzumi. The young Japanese driver is 18th in the standings in Formula 2, a whopping 160 points behind George Russell, championship leader. But I think he has the best chance because he's Japanese, and that's no form of racism. I would just like to throw that out there. But it's because of the fact Honda have said they want a Japanese driver racing for them. And Fukuzumi has been okay this season. Nothing incredible. He's been caught up in some nasty incidents, but I think he's good enough for the team to take him on. They've really spoken about this, wanting to have a Japanese driver. And it could be Nobuharu Matsushita. He was in Formula 2 last year, isn't in this year, but he picked up a few race wins, and I think he's the best Japanese driver out there, unless they went for someone like Sato, who's in Formula 3, but I think that's a bit too big of a step. The only other driver that could make a shock return to Formula 1 is Pascal Wehrlein. Deserves a seat in Formula 1. Really does deserve a seat in Formula 1. However, after being thrown out by Mercedes due to Ocon coming in and Sauber being bought out by Alfa Romeo, there was no seats for him anywhere. So he was kicked out, which is a huge shame because he's a huge talent and I think much better than a lot of drivers on the grid at the moment. However, with those huge Mercedes tyres, it's very difficult to put him into a team anywhere. I could have mentioned him at Williams. I could have mentioned him at Force India alongside Lance Stroll, because that very well could happen as well. But I think the most likely spot for Wehrlein would be Toro Rosso, sorry. He was another one linked at replacing Hartley earlier on in the season, but didn't quite get the nod. However, I think it's too little too late now for Wehrlein. And if I want to quickly just round up then, I think at Toro Rosso, it'll be Brendan Hartley and Narai Fukuzumi. I think that is what they will go with. I just have that hunch. I really do. Especially if he can finish the season. Fukuzumi's picked up 5 points at Hungary, which is an okay result. His best weekend of the whole season by country mile. So if he continue a bit of form, with Arden definitely improving that car of recent memory, then I think Fukuzumi is definitely going to be lined up for that seat alongside Brendan Hartley at Toro Rosso next year. Oh, it is done. It is done. We've covered every team. Let's quickly run through it then. Mercedes and Ferrari are 2 top teams. Ferrari, I've gone with Vettel and Raikkonen to keep their lineup. Mercedes have already confirmed they're keeping their lineup. For Red Bull, I've gone with Verstappen and Gasly. Renault have confirmed their lineup of Hülkenberg and Ricciardo. And McLaren, I've gone Sainz and Van Dorn. Force India, Ocon and Stroll. Williams, I've gone with Perez and Sorokin. Haas, they've kept the same. They've got Grosjean and Magnussen. Toro Rosso have got Brendan Hartley and Narai Fukuzumi. And Sauber have got Charles Leclerc and Antonio Giovinazzi. So drivers that won't be in Formula 1 anymore are Marcus Ericsson and Fernando Alonso, which means the 2 new drivers are Narai Fukuzumi and Antonio Giovinazzi. There we go. That's all of my predictions for next season. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. But let's move on then to the Formula 2 report. Formula 2 this season has been nothing short of outstanding, as it is every year. Maybe not so much for the class of driving, but just for the races that are on display. And the difference between the top drivers in the category and the bottom is phenomenal. And that is why you see such great races, great overtakes, and it really is proving to be a fantastic platform for these young drivers. Now, I was going to do a full, in-depth sort of mid-season review for Formula 2, but considering how long we've taken going through all the transfers in Formula 1, I think for today we'll just do a quick sort of roundup and analysis of the championship standings, the top 10, my thoughts on each of them, and how the season's going so far. So in 10th place at the moment is Jack Aitken, someone supported by Renault, and was in his rookie year in Formula 2 this year. The Brit came into Formula 2 after a really solid season in GP3. Now, he was definitely a driver that I thought was going to be fighting for the championship. However, inconsistencies have really hurt him this season. Now, he's got 2 podiums, one coming in Azerbaijan, the other coming in Spain. However, apart from that, he suffered multiple DNFs. Apart from those 2 podiums, he's only got 4 other finishes, which is incredible. Now, some of them have been reliability, some of them have been incidents with other drivers, but it's not the consistency you expect from someone coming in to Formula 2 with Renault backing and with the credentials like someone like Jack has. Now, he got a 4th place this weekend in the feature race in Hungary, but then in the sprint race didn't pick up any points once again. He's been a driver that, when he's in a position, he's great at defending, but his attacking prowess hasn't quite been there, quite like an Artem Markelov, Lando Norris, George Russell. But Jack Aitken has been okay this year, and if I was going to score him out of 10, which I'll do for each of these drivers, I'd probably give him a 6. Definitely room for improvement. Next up, in 9th place, is Louis Delatraz, the Swede in the Ferrari sort of Formula 2 team in Charouz Racing. Now, Delatraz last season didn't have the best season and moved to the Ferrari B team this year alongside Antonio Fuoco. Charles Leclerc, who was alongside Fuoco, moved to Formula 1 this year, so that space has been taken up by Delatraz. Now, in the first 6 rounds, Delatraz scored absolutely nothing, but since then has gone to score 62 points, which is one of the best amounts of points in the entire grid within that period since the Monaco Grand Prix, and is really proving that he is a talent, is Louis Delatraz. Now, like I said at the beginning of the year, he was nowhere, along with his teammate Fuoco. Both struggled at the beginning of the year, but Delatraz on 62 points is a solid effort, it really is. However, he's almost on half the points of his teammate Antonio Fuoco, and so for me, Delatraz is one of these drivers that is going to be stuck in Formula 2 and will never quite get that chance in Formula 1. But he's been okay this season. Standout weekend in Monaco, 2 4th places is definitely a solid job. He also got a 4th in Le Castellet in the next race. The weekend after that in Austria, nothing, but again in the feature race, got a 4th in the UK. So it's definitely been one to watch in recent weekends. In 8th place, Luca Giotto, another one who swapped teams for this season. With Luca, much like Jack Aitken's, been very inconsistent with his results, picking up a few points here and there, but then the following weekend scoring nothing at all, which is generally the trend with many Formula 2 drivers this year. Giotto is someone that last year was fighting for wins at the Russian time team, moved away this year and hasn't really been anywhere close to a win. Got a 3rd place in Le Castellet, the French Grand Prix, but apart from that, a few Nothing he races here and there. Got a P4 last time out in the sprint race in Hungary, but apart from that, nothing too crazy. 7th place, Sergio Sette Camara. 1 win last season at Spa, moved to Carlin alongside Lando Norris for this season. Now, Camara started this season off fantastically, picking up a 2nd place and a 5th place in the first round in Bahrain. He has since picked up another 2nd place in Le Castellet. However, he completely missed out the Monaco Grand Prix. Not as in he didn't score points, he didn't attend for whatever reason. I can't quite remember why he didn't attend, so I do apologise for that. However, when he has raced, he's been very consistent, 106 points, which is 53 behind his teammate Lando Norris. However, that gap, like I said, could easily be very different if he'd attended that Monaco Grand Prix. A couple of non-finishes here and there, didn't get any points at Silverstone when Norris picked up 11. Camara has been impressive for me this season, and I don't think his place in the championship 7th really reflects how he's performed overall. I didn't do a score out of 10 for De La Terraz or Giotto, but for Sergio Sette Camara, I would give him an 8 out of 10. Moving on to P6, Antonio Fuoco in the standings. Now, Fuoco was very much in Charles Leclerc's shadow last season. Both of them rookies, Leclerc smashing him to pieces, but Fuoco this season was the team leader. And moving to Charouz, Ferrari B team last year was Prima, this season it's Charouz. So it's almost the same sort of team, but not quite. Charouz were a brand new team, took a lot of the Prima boys with them to set up this Ferrari B team. And Fuoco, like De La Terraz, had an awful start to the season, managed to get a P3 at Azerbaijan, but apart from that, no points scored in Bahrain, only 3 scored in Spain. But since Spain, been able to pick up 4 podiums and a flurry of other points finishes, and has been, like De La Terraz in this sort of second part of the season we're in now, one of the more impressive drivers. He's 2 points behind 5th and 4th, who are both on 114 points. Now that's a solid effort from Antonio Fuoco, considering how awful that car was at the beginning of the season. So Fuoco has been one of these drivers that's gone under the radar a little bit, but has been putting some really solid performances in. I think Camara, for me, has had a better season so far. Camara's on 106 points, Fuoco's on 112, so Camara's still done better, but Fuoco, a solid job so far, a 7 out of 10. Now, moving on to 5th place, the top 5. In 5th and in joint 4th is Nick de Vries. Now, Nick de Vries is a McLaren young driver, and last year was driving around at the back a little bit, nothing too major. But last time out in Hungary, he took his first ever feature race win, but has been, again, a little bit inconsistent this season. Like Giotto, like Aitken, has had some really solid results. But then other weekends has been absolutely nowhere. And if you want to be fighting for that World Championship, and for De Vries, if he wants to be in contention for that McLaren seat, I didn't even mention him earlier. That sort of tells you almost what sort of a different class Norris is in. De Vries needs to be getting more consistent results, and you don't see many Formula 2 drivers staying for more than 3 seasons, and De Vries most likely will be there next year, and I don't think he'll get a Formula 1 drive. He's one of these drivers that could easily move to Formula E, and I could see that happening for Nick, but Formula 1, I think that's a step too far for Nick de Vries, but it's been an okay season so far, and to be on joint points with the man in 4th, Artem Markelov, is a very good job indeed. So, for Nick de Vries, I'll give him a 7 out of 10. Now, Artem Markelov in P4. Really good start to the year. 2 third places after a fantastic race in the feature race and the sprint race in the first round of the season in Bahrain. Since then, it's gone pretty much under the radar. Feature race win in Monaco. A P3 in the sprint race in Austria. Apart from that, it hasn't really done anything too special. And for the Russian time driver, he did actually, I will mention, he made a fantastic move in Austria. One of the best moves of the season. A triple pass. You don't see that very often. However, apart from that, has been very quiet this year, Artem Markelov. And for me, it's the benchmark. You know, he is a Renault young driver, but I think for me, he's the Formula 2 driver. And if you're getting above Artem Markelov, that is your F1 drivers. That's how I see it. That's how I saw it last year. That's how I see it this year. Markelov is definitely the king of Formula 2. However, there is that calibre above him that are the Formula 1 drivers. If you catch my vibe, that's how I see it anyway. If you can beat Markelov, your Formula 1 standard. Markelov is just on the bubble. A bit like a Sergei Sorokin is Artem Markelov. But I think if you can beat him, your Formula 1 standard. Now, that's why I'm a bit iffy about Nick de Vries, Antonio Fuoco, Cesare Camara to a degree. Like I said, Camara, I think, would be ahead of these guys if he'd have attended the Monaco Grand Prix. Markelov is a solid driver, and for rushing time is exactly what they want, fits what they need, and I think Markelov will be in Formula 2 for a few more seasons, I do believe, but I think for Renault, they obviously don't want him, mainly because they've got Hülkenberg and Ricciardo signed up. Jack Aitken, I think he could do a couple of seasons in Formula 2, and then if Hülkenberg retires, would easily fit into that Renault team, but Markelov, I think, is past his best. I know he's only young like most of the Formula 2 drivers, but already I think he's maybe missed his peak. But it's been a solid year for Markelov, but not as good as last year by any means. So it's only going to be a 6 out of 10 for Artem Markelov. So the top 3 then in the Formula 2 World Championship at the summer break. Only 8 more rounds, which is only 4 more weekends to go in Formula 2. In third place for Dams is Alexander Albon. Now, Albon has actually, in my opinion, been very, very good this season. Last season went under the radar. I think he was ART last season. I can't quite remember too well. I'm not too good with teams in Formula 2. But this year moved to Dams. Ollie Rowland, the British hope last season. The only one anywhere near Charles Leclerc last season was Ollie Rowland. He was at Dams, but moved to Williams F1 team as their third driver this year. So Albon was put into Dams and has replaced him very, very well indeed. 2 feature race wins in Azerbaijan for the first, and in Silverstone, the other one. Multiple podiums across the season. It's been a great job from Alexander Albon, and he just needs to keep it up. He's 30 points behind George Russell, a points difference that can feasibly be dealt with in just one weekend. So Albon is in a chance for this championship. He's almost the outside hope with 4 weekends to go, but he's definitely there, and he's impressed me this year as Alexander Albon, and I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. Now, if you haven't really been following too much of what I've been saying, this is where you probably will get interested. First and second, you know who they are. It's George Russell and Lando Norris, the 2 Brits fighting it out for the Formula 2 World Champion. The one, Lando Norris, McLaren young driver. The other, George Russell, Mercedes young driver. Russell currently leads Norris by a mere 12 points. So that sort of tells you how close this season is. And with 8 rounds to go, that can swing either way. Now, Norris, like I said earlier, feature race win in the first weekend. Since then, he's only had 3 podiums. George Russell, on the other hand, has had, just get ready for this, 4 feature race wins, the most of any driver on the grid. So you're thinking, how's the points gap so close? Well, the main thing is Russell's huge inconsistency. He's on the podium, he gets nothing. He wins a feature race, he gets nothing. That is literally what has happened all season long for George Russell. Lando Norris has only missed out on points in feature race and sprint races twice all season, which is, in Formula 2, an incredible feat to have. So that sort of tells you how much of a different calibre these 2 drivers are. Norris, Mr. Consistent. Russell is great at the winning, but then if he's having an off weekend, isn't quite there. And if he's winning, then in the reverse grid in the sprint race, isn't quite moving back up the grid. So it's really interesting to see what's happening with both of those 2 drivers. For me, both of them, I'd give them a 9 out of 10 for this season. I really would. And I think it's obvious how I want both of them to improve. Russell, I want him to be more consistent. Norris, I want to see him winning more races. But I know that's not really the best mid-season review. But as I said, I spent so long talking about the transfers. I just wanted to get this out there. There wasn't loads of news in Formula 2 this weekend, but usually in this segment, what I would do is talk about the race, talk about any transfers, any crazy things happening in the world of Formula 2. But because this is a trial run, I just wanted to do a sort of a mini sort of a season mid-review report. So that is the end of this week's Formula 2 report. It's done. It's over. You've listened to me for about an hour. Let's talk F1. The first ever episode is done. I'd love to know in the comments what driver transfers you think are going to happen next season. Who do you think is going to be at all these crazy teams? I'd love to know your predictions in the comments below. The Formula E show will be coming out this Tuesday. That'll be a full review of the Formula E Season 4 World Championship. Thank you guys for watching. What an incredible time we are having on this channel at the moment. Incredible scenes on my Lance Stroll video. 100,000 views in 3 days. That is madness. But what's also madness is my most viewed video is a Lance Stroll video. So I don't really want to keep that as the most viewed at this current point, considering the sort of stigma around Lance Stroll. But I just want to say thank you and welcome to all of you that are new on this channel. I can't believe this show is finally out. I really can't. Thank you guys for watching. If you've got any sort of constructive criticism in general, any ideas for the show, chuck them down in the comments below. A final thank you from me. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.